All right, welcome everybody. For those that are early, or actually now right on time, we're going to get started in just 1 second. We're going to let everybody kind of get situated and settled in here. We're going to give that just a couple minutes. If you have joined us already, do know that your video will be off. You also will be muted throughout it, but you do have the ability to interact with us via the Q&A. So please take a look at the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please definitely use that to interact with us throughout the two sections that we have here, because we've got a really awesome event today, and I want to make sure that we hear from you, and of course, we answer any of the open questions you have. So feel free to get some water, coffee, bathroom break. We are going to get started in just a couple minutes as more people start to file in. All right, for those that have also just jumped in the last minute, do know we are going to get started. You're in the right spot. Hopefully you see my screen about the AV Integrator Cloud Exchange. We will get started in a second. People are just filing in. Want to make sure everyone gets a chance to join live who wants to join live. For those that did just jump into the webinar, please note that your video is off. You are muted as well, but there is a Q&A button for you to be able to interact with us. We've got two awesome sections of this webinar. Please interact throughout both of them. And then at the end, we'll make sure we address any of those questions. And of course, if anything's relevant, we're going to be addressing them throughout the entire event today. So we're just going to start in one more minute. Okay, and I think with that, we are at time to go. So for the third time, apologies for those that jumped in, but it'll be my third welcome. Welcome all of you guys to the AV Integrator Cloud Exchange. Very excited for the event today. And also as a quick reminder, before we get into the details, your video's off, you are muted, but there is a Q&A button. Please use that Q&A. We want to make sure we address all of you throughout here. Throughout the event, we're going to have two main sections. We're going to have first an actual panel. We're going to have with Jeff and Michael. They're going to join us in a second. Then we're going to get into a much more technical deep dive of actually setting up and addressing the points that Jeff and Michael brought up. And throughout it, we're going to have some polls. And at the end, once you exit Zoom, there is going to be a survey. Please make sure you answer that survey. So to start off and to kick us off, welcome everyone to Xyte's first AV Integrator Cloud Exchange. I'm Andrew Gross. I run our global sales here at Xyte, and I'm going to be your host for today. It isn't a special event with really some of the best minds of the industry that we've brought together here to have this conversation, and is going to be a precursor for many things you're going to hear and see over at InfoComm in just over 1 week. And the goal of today's event is that you're going to leave here with not just knowledge and awareness of the key problems that need to be addressed by your integration business, but also clear steps to take and actually act upon these problems immediately and begin to start positioning your dealership and your integration business really above the competition because you attended today or because you were watching the recording. Now, while this is the first of these AV Integrator Cloud events, there's been a series of events that we've held at Xyte over the last several months. Last week, we were proud to be a part of the launch of the Open AV Cloud initiative. If you guys haven't heard about it, please go to openav.cloud. It's an awesome new initiative that we're one of the founding members of, alongside Sony and Legrand and Brightsign and Shore and a bunch of others, to launch this new initiative that you'll see at InfoComm to adopt open standards. We're not going to talk too much about that today. It may come up in our panel with Jeff and Michael in a second, but we're going to be taking that and we're going to be jumping into this conversation around the buyer's proof of view. Really, how do we win enterprise AV in 2025? So I'm super excited for today's conversation and, of course, the training to come after it. And I hope you are all as well. And a reminder again, please be interactive, go to the Q&A, and please ask questions throughout the entire event. But without further ado, let's welcome on stage both Jeff and Michael, and let's start this panel. All right. I see Michael and Jeff have just joined us. Perfect. I see you guys both. Thank you very much. So welcome both. Let's just start off with some quick intros. Jeff, why don't we start with yourself?
Yeah, hey Andrew. Thanks for having me today. Jeff Dietz with Deloitte. I've been with the firm for a little over 11 years. I'm responsible for multiple areas, so really I'm pulling into the design solutions leader role. Throughout my career, really with Deloitte, have been focused on our larger client innovation spaces, and that's all the way from design, activation, deployment, all the way to support. So it's great to be pulling back into more of our practitioner spaces for our medium and to large conference rooms as well. But great to be here and excited to have a conversation with you all today.
Thanks, Jeff. And Michael?
Hey, Andrew. Thank you for having me as well. Michael Goldman, and I am a principal and the CEO of CDA, which is a technology AV design consulting firm. And oh gosh, uh, I spent the majority of my career, CDA and prior, working with very large enterprise companies, clients, listening to their challenges, helping them solve problems, and uh, like I touch a lot of the spaces that Jeff touches, and our approach and the things that we do at CDA, which is a little unique. I mean, yes, we design spaces, we do uh, future planning and help people do campus development, but more importantly, we also solve problems. So we're engaged on a regular basis with large direct end users to help them solve challenges like, gee, how do I improve the overall experience of our customers in our rooms? And it has nothing to do with picking widgets and whatnot, right? It goes all the way from workflow through keeping the rooms running. So I'm really passionate about this, and the topic is exciting to me, so I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you both here as well. So uh, if you didn't know, right, our audience is mainly integrators today that have joined. We have a smattering of some manufacturers and end users on the line as well, but a lot of integrators. They're all kind of joining here to really go back to the title of this panel, which is the buyer's point of view. How to win enterprise AV in 2025. And really, the reason for this title, Jeff and Michael, was what we've seen to kind of kick us off is AV has become part of critical communications and the true infrastructure of an enterprise. In the past, if meeting rooms or classrooms went down, it was inconvenient, right? I would figure out another way to meet. But now, if the technology goes down, it becomes a business problem, it becomes a productivity problem. And because of this AV meeting room technology transferring from nice to necessary, people are now working differently. And so, with the majority of the workforce now needing this technology, it's become an important productivity tool, kind of like your laptop or your phone. So, let's talk about what that means. Michael, I want to start with you. How have expectations changed from clients as a whole in the last 3 to 5 years around AV/IT? Are we just wiring up rooms today, or are we doing something different?
Well, we're still wiring rooms, right? But I think the fundamental difference is the strategy that goes behind what we wire and how we decide what to wire, right? Like, I think you alluded to this, but in the old days, and by the way, I started my career in the integration space. So in the old days, the audience, the people we would talk to if we were going to roll out a room, was much narrower than it is today. And if there were a problem in the room, it could be tied off, it could be contained. It didn't have a massive, usually it didn't have a massive impact on the business. Today, there's a lot more technology deployed, a lot more technology used. We're in a time where almost everybody in the company has to use it, right? There was a time period when only three people needed to know how to use the system in the large meeting room, and you had a handler that came in and set the room up for you. Like, that's not the case anymore. You need video in order to do your job. So what that really means is the stakes are much higher because there's more stuff deployed, and if it fails, it's more likely to have a direct impact on the bottom line of the organization or the company. And you get in, the level of the problem, it changes, right? I mean, now when there's a real issue, it rises right up to the top of the CIO stack or higher, or the head of real estate, right? So I think the biggest thing is that people go into a room and they expect the room to work like their laptop and their phone, like you said. And we as the AV industry have to figure out a way to deliver that, right? Because our customers, they can't do their work without it. And oh, by the way, the companies and the real estate offices and the people that invested all this money into space, they need people to come back, and they're not going to be motivated to come back if they feel they get a better experience or they could do better at home. So that's what I see as the first major change in, yeah.
Yeah, Jeff, are you seeing that at Deloitte?
We are, and we've really seen, coming back to the pandemic, we video enabled everything. Everybody was out. But what we've really focused and moved towards is that user journey, right? And a purpose-defined space. And how do we create something that's intuitive and user-friendly that doesn't compromise features and functionality? I think that's our biggest play and formula we're looking at today. Because in some instances, you want the room to have all the bells and whistles. And Michael, like you said, and others, you just want to be able to come in and activate an end user to say, I can quickly get into my meeting or quickly start my activity and be off to the races. So it's really a shift in that mindset and getting in front of stakeholders to understand what the scope is and how we can redirect towards the user journey for those purpose-defined rooms and spaces.
So, but Jeff, I'll stay on you then. I would argue, let's say, the majority of the folks on the call are saying like, no duh, right? Like I've heard that already. But what's their role in this? How can they help someone like you actually deliver on what you and Michael are saying?
Absolutely. So I think, at least for me, it is a clear and defined scope up front that aligns to stakeholder vision. So when you get to your end goal and end product, you can walk those leaders into that space, and that vision of that actual room matches renderings and design intent all the way throughout your product. And as you're doing that, it's really how are we ensuring that we have stability and reliability in that room that instills confidence with our customers day over day, year over year. Software-driven solutions that'll get us to a point where we're not, ripping hardware, replacing hardware, something we can grow into, and also having a roadmap and journey for what that room will be after the 3 to 5 year lifespan. I think that's key for growth and understanding how you can future forward technology in those spaces.
And I think that's a great point, right? Making sure that they're delivering more than just the hardware. So I guess a couple questions to stick on you, Jeff, and then we'll bring this to Michael from like a higher level, maybe from what he's seeing from multiple clients at once. Is A, can you do this on your own, right? Do you need more people as part of your team? Is it a true resource problem inside and out? Or is this also tools or better partners or things that maybe aren't here yet? Like, how do you see this being delivered beyond just, this is what I need, I got to get better information, and then I'm going to have better rooms? How are we actually going to take action on it?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. And better monitoring tools are a necessity, right? You're only as good as your data, and that needs to be actionable data that gets you in a proactive state. We get stuck in this reactive state, putting out fires from day to day, and it's hard to come out of that spin into saying we are looking at our compiled data. We know what our rooms are and how they're functioning and which leaders or which folks will be in those spaces. So it really starts with how good is your data? And if you have great data, that can roll into your support model. But we do heavily rely on vendors, our integrators. There's multiple layers of partnerships we have throughout our project as it goes into design, all the way into deployment, as well as support, right? So I think what we really have to come back to is just ensuring that as we're building these rooms, we're putting thoughtful intent towards what the monitoring will be so we can carry that data forward for lessons learned, insights, and how we can enhance or make those spaces better to grow into the future. Today, that's one of our biggest challenges we have, right? We're going through a transitional phase to simplify some of our smaller spaces. How do we capture the monitoring for those rooms that are a BYOD only approach, right? So there's some challenges to where we can gather data, but it's so insightful not only for ourselves, but say for real estate, if you're looking at telemetry data and those type of things. How many people are in a space? Well, that can lead to future build outs and projects. Say we may not need 50 of these small rooms. We need to divide that up into a bigger subset based on how users are really coming into that program and using those spaces.
Michael, on your end?
So I agree with everything that Jeff has said. Let me add on to it. Um, One of the things that I find people have gotten hung up on or stuck on, or choose the words that you like, whether it's a consultant, an integrator, or in some cases, the people in the AV department, we just continue to do the same thing. And we don't often ask the right questions and listen. So the first thing that I would put out there and suggest integrators think about is talk to more than just the AV person at the end user and understand what success looks like, right? What are people trying to do in the space? I think that's really critical, and and understand how people work, right? Like I think if you understand, forget the technology for a minute. And I say that because everybody on this webinar, I'm sure, understands the technology and can go to a website or a cut sheet and pick the right things and electrically make a system work. But that doesn't mean it's going to work for the audience. So it's really important to understand, if you want to add a lot of value, understand the client that you're working with, understand their needs. And I don't mean, hey, I need to connect a laptop here, but what are they trying to accomplish? That's number one. Number two, get outside your comfort zone. Spend a little time in the IT side. And this also layers in with what I just described. So it's important to understand applications, and it's important to understand how people work. And an example of that is, hey, um, you can take a meeting room if it has the right technology in it for collaboration and use it when you're not doing a video call and get a tremendous amount of value from it, right? Like, for example, if I have an MTR, if I use in my room, if I use Copilot, and if I'm using the M365 suite of products, right? Productivity tools, and Jeff and I were to go into a room because we're going to talk about what the future state of something looks like. And we start whiteboarding, we're meeting, and we're talking, and three people from Jeff's team aren't there. We could be using that system to capture that information. And then, even if we don't use video, we're capturing the talk track, right? And now I'm taking pictures. All that stuff goes up into SharePoint, and Copilot will give you a summary. So now someone that goes back that couldn't be in that meeting can get a summary, understand what happened, right? So that, I mean, this is low-hanging fruit that I'm giving you. I'm not giving you any great revelation. However, more applications are going to continue to evolve. So if you want to bring real value, I think it's important to understand where the puck is going, right? It's important to understand how these technologies impact business. If you do, then the solutions that you provide are going to be so much stickier, right? And the client is going to see all this value. That's one thing. The other thing that I would urge you to do, Jeff talked about data. All too often in my career, I've watched people design a system. At the conclusion or the end of that design exercise, someone then says, "Oh, do you want to monitor and manage the space?" Yeah. Well, what kind of information do we need? Oh, give me everything. Two problems. Number one, everything's not an answer. It creates noise. And we may get to talk about what that noise means and how it negatively impacts people later in this discussion. But the first piece is noise. The second piece of it is that my monitoring and management system's only as good as the piece of equipment that I've got in space. So if that piece of equipment can't tell me very much, and I don't understand how the strategy that my client uses to keep their IT resources running, I might do something really bad, make a bad decision, and in fact, instead of giving them value, remove value because I put the client in a long-term position that's really challenging, right? So I think it's super, super important to understand now that, and especially if you're talking about UC related technology, AV and UC glued together, this truly is critical communication. The rooms have to work. So I would want to start with, hey, how do you keep your technology working? And what kind of information do you need to know in order to keep it running proactively? And once I even just know those two things, it makes it a lot easier as I start picking the equipment, as I start designing the system, because it raises questions for me to think through on that design exercise. I could
That's
keep
a
going,
that's a
but I'll stop.
I was going to add a thought there, Michael, and that's a great point, right? We get stuck in this mode from installation to support, right? And by starting that conversation on data and reporting at the beginning, it really helps you to transition to that support phase, right? As well as giving you a single dashboard to say, I know what the noise is for my organization. I want to pull these nuggets in for the reporting factors that are meaningful to me in my organization, right? I think that's the part you want to get to as soon as you hit the support and your feet land on the ground. You say this is an operational space. You have to have that lens, right, to begin day one.
So two other nuances on that, Jeff, right? So you mentioned, hey, we have data and it helps us to determine how many rooms of a different size we need. Here's another slice at it. I think at this point we can all agree we need video everywhere. So I don't really need the data to
Sure.
tell me, do I need video conferencing? But if everyone relies on this technology, I do want to understand what are the failure rates or the incident rates that we have in the rooms. Then I can go look to see what the stuff is that's in the rooms. And then I can start to understand, do I have pilot error? Do I have, I bought the least expensive piece of equipment and it fails all the time? Do I have some other, uh, downstream related problem, like something with my network, right? So ideally, you want to take that data, you want to look at it through that lens when you're coming up on refresh time, even if
Exactly.
you're retrofitting the rooms, right? Because now we have an extra person sitting at the table. The person's the data, and the data can say, yeah, 80% of what you're about to do is good, but 20% of it should get tweaked. And the last piece of this is what the data does is it helps drive a conversation of the right people around the table because people think they operate in a certain way. But when you get into the conversation and you start comparing the data and you start asking questions, you'd be surprised at how many people go, maybe we really don't do it that way. Maybe that's not really the workflow in service and operations. And we don't really capture information for those tickets, although everyone thinks that they do, right? So I think there's a massive set of value that people don't think about when it comes to the data.
Yeah,
Agreed.
let's stay on that for a second, actually, Jeff. I want to rephrase this over to yourself because I think Michael brought up a couple good points, but I'm very curious from your point of view, me working at obviously one of the largest companies in the world, what data matters? We say data, but data is a very broad sense of the word and of what we're trying to do here. Is data the thing is on or off? What metrics matter to you? Are we looking at uptime? Are we looking at mean time to resolution? I'm sure the answer is yes, but from your point of view, what should someone on this call today take home and put into action of, yes, this is the data that I'm going to deliver to my customer?
Yeah, I think it's an evolving landscape. We all know up downtime has been kind of what we've looked at across many years of data and reporting, but we're seeing that change and it's going more towards the telemetry. How many people are in space? How can that affect environmentals in the room? How are we driving that towards sustainability? There's a lot of different layers as it comes to that data and reporting. I think for the technical side, the more items we can get on network, and back to Michael's conversation about getting that IT bleed into the AV world, is understanding of health and how we can be responsive and proactive to seeing which components in room need support or assistance before leaders get into those rooms. So that data set can be up downtime, like I said, it could be telemetry, it can be health of your systems in terms of firmware, the ability to push updates. I think it's across the board, just really ensuring that you have complete ownership and control over each of those spaces in a fashion that makes sense for a proactive, not only deployment when it comes to upgrades, but also in terms of just daily support, right? Knowing that I have some of the top leaders in the firm coming into one of our spaces, and if I have that as part of a data reporting metric, I can then put boots on the ground to then triple check that these rooms are ready for those leaders to come into. And I think that's the piece today that is not set up, at least in a way that is visible to all of our stakeholders to say, starting today, X amount of rooms. We know that 15 need support and assistance that can be done remotely or virtually from our tech team or our engineers. And we may have a subset of 3 or 4 that actually need boots on the ground to go into to reboot or check cables or those type of items. So I think hand in hand, it really comes down to number of components you have in space. Up downtime is absolutely important, but it's more about who is in the room, how they're using the space, and what are those metrics around platforms, say for video. And it really kind of begins to deep dive into those metrics as you go forward.
Can I just interject something here? So
Yeah, please, Michael.
I think that's all again dead on, right? But like anything else, you have different stakeholders within your organization, right? So some people, I mean, everyone cares about everything, but some people, their job is the room working. Other people are tasked with what gear should we be buying when we do the refresh,
Totally.
right? Other people are tasked with how big should the spaces be? How often are they used? How do different teams work? So I think if I have my integrator hat on or my consultant hat on, because we do this kind of thing, I would almost build out a matrix, right? and I would try to put myself in the slot of each of those stakeholder groups because they each have slightly different care abouts. And so I would, before I design anything, I'd start making a matrix that says these are the things that are important to the different groups within this particular client that I'm thinking about. Once you have that, then it's really easy to go back and determine what data we need for a specific thing, right? So like part of it is just organization and the way in which you think about it. I think that's super important, all the way down to, hey, uh, is brand X, we have brand X in all these rooms. Well, did someone think about the incidents that are connected to brand X? Should we continue with brand X with this thing, or should we move to brand Y? Right? So the data can tell us that, maybe not directly. So I think the missing piece, um, at least in my experience, and is that people provide the data, but they don't analyze the data. It's
Yeah, I
super
agree, Michael.
important. Go ahead.
I,
Yeah.
I would add really quick, like if you do this correctly, right? If you, like you said, you spin up the matrix, this is going to define your refresh strategy and your roadmap for future improvements in space. And I think that's the biggest key, right? There's a cost savings that comes with that approach that is so valuable, right? Instead of throwing it at the wall and see if it sticks, you actually now have a prescribed approach to how these rooms should function based off of your trends, your reporting, your data that you can carry year over year into your organization. And I think that's what you're going towards, Michael, but it, yeah, when done correctly, it makes our lives so much, I don't even think easier is the right word. It is just a well-oiled machine that continues to grow and exponentially, evolve, which is great.
So one last thing, I'll be quick with it, but experience. So the holy grail, the one thing that everyone's missing, or uh, is we know the display worked and we know the call worked, but the next step in this is thinking about how was the overall experience of the meeting. That is critical. And there are multiple data points and lots of ways to get that. I'm not going to talk to you offline about that. We're not going to, side rail the call, but I would just say that's the thing that no one thinks about when they're thinking about data. But I would say is super important because if you can go to your client and say, we're going to help you to ensure that your user community is having a good experience, right? That is so valuable to the business because it means that the people that are using the rooms are having, if they're having a positive experience, they don't have to worry about technology. They just have to worry about, am I communicating my mission the right way? Right? And that leads
Right.
to money or revenue or whatever. Andrew.
No, this is great, guys. This is awesome because for those on the call, just hearing about what's top of mind for you, Jeff, and Michael from your clients. I mean, these are conversations or they're conversation changers, being an integrator of not just going back and telling me what the newest control system is, but really what affects my bottom line is what they want to hear with a partner, because that's what they're looking at these integration firms for. So I want to shift gears slightly. And I'm going to start with you, Michael, because I think we've talked a lot about what this changing conversation is around changing of rooms and enterprise spending, right? I mean, that's the goal here is where does the money go? And I took some notes because I heard some big topics that you two were talking about. Obviously, what I found most interesting was that none of you talked about, well, we need the greatest sound bar in the world to make these meeting rooms work. We need the greatest high-res display to make this work. Instead, what you guys were talking about was data, interfacing with other teams like real estate, finance, IT, focusing on outcomes and value of the room, and investing for the future. And I think these are four things that are newer, at least in the conversation stack, that integrators should start having with their clients like you, Jeff, and with your partners like you, Michael. But Michael, to pick on you for a second, what I get asked a lot about, and kind of building off of that event last week with the announcement of this Open AV Cloud, where do standards and integrations kind of play here? And what can a successful integrator actually take action on with this openness or standards to deliver on those four net new conversations?
Yep. Um, I would start with being empathetic to my customer. And in all seriousness, like, I mean, I think that it's a big deal because again, you need to start with put yourself in their shoes. Forget you're selling them something. Put yourself in their shoes, help them solve a problem. You will make a sale, right? And in fact, you'll probably make a better sale than if you just said, let me sell you the sound bar. So that's the first thing. Second thing, understand from your client first, what does success look like? Once I know that, then I'm going to start thinking about scale. Lots of people develop standards and they say I have standards and I watch them roll them out. They roll them out as one-offs. So develop a standard, have some discipline, and then roll them out as a standard. There's great savings when you do that. Um, the steps are different than the way you do a typical project, right? Next, when you're doing your design, go back to that first conversation. What does success look like? And put that in, let that be one of the tenets of how you're picking your equipment. You want things that can be monitored. And ultimately, you want things that can be managed. Form a strategy. Think about strategies that help you be proactive. So you may have mentioned this, Andrew. I'll use some additional words, but ideally, if the world's perfect, I want to be able to test remotely with a script all my rooms well in advance, like at 2 a.m. or whatever. And when the team comes in the morning, I want them to know if there's a problem or not, because then they can quickly go address it. And the way to address it might be, oh, gee, we have an executive scheduled to be in this room. We found there's a problem. Let's look at the schedule. Let's shift them to a different room. Let's go into the room. Let's take the broken widget out of the room. Let's plug a spare in its place, get the room running, put it back in service, go troubleshoot offline, right? That's a strategy. And it also requires spare equipment and things of that nature. That kind of thinking, I believe, will resonate with an enterprise customer. And by the way, enterprise does not just mean corporate. A university could be an enterprise, right? We're just talking about somebody with lots and lots of rooms, a big estate. They need to keep running, right? And so I think those are the thing to me, those are the things that are really important. I mean, and it does start with a standard, but before you get to the standard, ask the right questions about the environment and how technology is supported. Understand that, because if you understand that, you're going to answer a lot of questions that'll come up downstream.
Jeff, on your end?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of ongoing conversations about our standards, and they are evolving quickly, right? We're moving from more hardware-defined technology to software-driven solutions, right? So you didn't hear me say it's the new shiny thing. Let's bring that into our space, where in some of our innovation spaces, that's absolutely the first thing everything looks at. But what we're finding is that if we are looking at standards and we are deploying a roadmap to standards that we're able to scale and grow into, we still have the ability to lift and shift if needed, if something newer, better, faster comes out, but at least it keeps us in the same features and functionality arena, right? So by knowing that if we're coming into, say, our video-enabled spaces for our practitioners, we want that user experience and journey to be replicated in something that they feel confident and comfortable in, no matter which product we choose, right? That should just be a catalyst for them to succeed. It shouldn't be the defining piece that makes their meeting successful, if that makes sense. So those users coming in, especially if we're going back, you heard me mention before, from a BYOD standpoint, if a user's coming in from BYOD, we all learn very quickly at our home offices how to be successful in that arena. But how do we measure that in a room? And then as you get into a medium-sized space, now we're leveraging technologies that can give us that data and reporting, but how do we ensure that the roadmap for that technology, that we're able to use that data, carry it forward, and then apply that to our evolving standards? That is the piece I think that is, at least from me coming from larger innovation spaces, our standards have evolved from a longer roadmap more to what is that user in space doing today versus a multi-purpose aspect. Michael, I think you have more to add there too.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to touch on one thing. You mentioned BYOD, right? And so
Sure,
we're in this kind of unique, we're in a unique phase. And the
we
unique
are.
phase is that right now, BYO, like the BYOD or the desktop client of these collaboration platforms, the desktop client's actually more, and in some cases, the mobile client is more powerful than the room client. This is the
Yeah,
first time we've had
it's
that situation, right?
it's been the push. And we see
And
both ways, though. We want to have a room that's easy and intuitive for somebody to come in and join from their own machine, right? Their own soft codec driven solution. But we also want a room that's fully enabled for that enhanced meeting style. And that's the game.
right. Well, so keeping that in mind, people are comfortable with their personal technology. It's right now has more features. It's more advanced than perhaps the room client today. The other thing that's important to remember is that in some cases, people are being forced back to the office, and the technology in the rooms is really far behind.
Sure.
So I think something that's super important uh, is getting your infrastructure correct. And that means moving everything to the network that you can move to the network. Again, it's a little scary, if you're someone who's spent a lot of time in the AV space and not touched or dabbled in the IT space. But we have clients that I'm not allowed to build AV networks, right? With them, I would say the majority of my clients, everything's going on the corporate network. It may go on its own VLAN, but it's on the corporate network. And there's a lot of reasons why, again, offline
Sure.
conversation. But I think that distinction, if you have things on the corporate network and you have your infrastructure right, it makes it really easy to say, oh, well, for the next 18 months, we're doing BYOD. But once the room client gets to the right place or the hardware gets to the right place, we need to add more elements. It's no more difficult than changing a light fixture, right? I won't say a sink because plumbing's more complex, but I mean like literally you shouldn't have to rip the whole room apart. You should be able to make incremental adds quickly and easily that will give you far greater capabilities.
Yeah, I'd agree. This is a remote deployment schedule, right? So you have the power back in your engineering team and it's infrastructure changes that don't impact the end user. So your uptime is, of the utmost importance. And if you can eliminate downtime and spaces by doing these items remotely, like that's huge. And that's certainly where we're driving towards.
That's great. And I think even just to add on to that and kind of wrap a bow on this before I ask you guys one last question is it certainly sounds like everything from your initial statements about being able to be cross-functional around teams, but now what you just mentioned related to being agile in your systems is not having to potentially rip and replace everything, make sure it's upgradable and future-proof, being able to invest in systems that are able to be integratable to other things in your environment and move away from closed systems that really just lock you into lack of data, lack of integrations, lack of reporting, lack of communication. I mean, that's really unfortunately what we see. So hearing standards and openness and cross-functional devices is awesome to hear. And I think that's exactly where a lot of the integrators on this call are going to gain a lot from. I want to close with one final question as I'm looking at the clock here. And I'm going to start with you, Michael, and then we'll close with you, Jeff. But
Sure.
we talked a lot about kind of the current state, what's happening, what's the changing conversation, what can we do about it today, how do we add value as an integrator partner with someone like you, Jeff. But Michael, to kick us off on this final question, where should we be looking next? What innovation areas should integrators and even consultants like yourself kind of be paying attention to right now? And obviously, everyone's going to roll their eyes and thinking AI, self-healing, agentic systems. But what's hype versus helpful in this world?
Sure. And I started to touch on this earlier, but I am going to say the word AI, but from a different perspective. So you hear AI everywhere. People are sick of hearing it. It means lots of things. I believe that, again, you want to look at where the puck is going. I think that if I were still an integrator, and I do some of this because I'm a consultant and I'm basically like an integrator, except I'm not screwing things to the wall. I spend a fair amount of time looking at what's happening in the IT space, and I look at use cases and I look at applications and I try to understand how people are doing business or how people are learning. And once I understand that, I take that and I sort of backwards engineer it into, okay, well, what needs to be in the space to pull that off, right? So part of it is educating ourselves continually and putting ourselves in an area that might make us uncomfortable, right? I think to be successful, you have to get out of the AV silo. And we talk about AV and IT convergence all the time, but I think you need to go outside of it and go into the application world. I think that's really super important because that is going to drive what needs to happen in a room. And so earlier, I think I talked about using Copilot and whatnot, so Jeff and I are having a meeting, right? Let's take it a step further. I think if you look further down the road, you know, we will have the capability for three people to sit around the table in a room. No one speaks the same language, and you'll be able to have a conversation and collaborate spoken word in your native language, right? Like that kind of technology is it's sort of here now, and it'll be real soon. Or if you're on a video call and you have bad connectivity and some of my words start to get corrupted, rather than having it drop out or get corrupted, the system's going to correct my words, right? So, if you understand that, all of a sudden you can now look at physical space and technology, and you can start to apply and make the right suggestions in order to help your client have runway for the future, so that they can have this regular cycle of keeping up with the technology required to meet the business demands. And the last piece of it is that in the old days, um, you sell an AV system and it's $100,000, and the client would say, great, I'm going to keep it 10 years or 8 years. Well, guess what? We're now into computers, right? And we're thinking 3 year cycles. The cycles are much shorter. So back to the infrastructure and the software side of things rather than the hardware side of things. I mean, yes, you need hardware, but you need to be open. If you are down the proprietary path, evolving and changing and pivoting to meet the demands of what gets thrown at you is going to be incredibly difficult and costly, and you don't want to be in that bucket. I could keep going, but I don't know, Jeff, have anything
That's
you
great.
want to
Yeah,
add?
Jeff, how about you?
That's, you're spot on, Michael. In my lens, it's around, AI and the merge with collaboration, right? How do you create that agentic productivity that it knows we can carry conversations forward, and it's giving you more time in your day to be productive and reduce noise. That is number one key, and I think a selfish, at least for myself, wanting to pull that to the top, right? And I think we see tons of productivity at it. But I think ultimately it's more around some of the automation we see in spaces. So if I think about the user journey in a space, and if we really get to a point where these rooms are 100% productive, and I can just walk in and the room knows me, knows my profile, knows the lighting, knows where I like the shades, knows that I have content at the ready I need to present. It's kind of that Tesla experience, right? Not to put a label on it, but it's knowing the user coming into a room and how you can get in and begin to be productive. And then you layer on these other components, right? The automation piece is one, the AI top cap for collaboration platforms. And if you're doing it right from the beginning in your design phase, you are able to visualize these spaces in a way that you never have before. So we're looking at different items and arenas around VR, to giving stakeholders a vision and view of what the actual intangible scope will be for space. So when you get to the end of the product and they walk in the room and they say, well, it's just like what I saw in that 3D rendering or I saw in that VR application. And that's all the way down to from going from current state to future state of how this room can function and form, and presenting out your roadmap of what it could be in the next 5 years. So you get an entire vision and story that really starts to create the room of the future.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much. I think this is a great place to stop this. Jeff, Michael, this was super insightful. I think the guys and the gals on the call definitely got a lot from this on really how to kind of reframe their integration business when working with folks like yourself, Jeff and Michael. For now, though, since we're at time, I'm going to let you two go, but I'm going to bring you back on later on today. So thank you for now. I'm going to reshare my screen. And for those that are listening in, what we're going to do now is we're going to take what Jeff and Michael really just said and start to put it into action. And with that, I want to bring back on stage with me Johnny Bonker. So Johnny's going to join us in a second. Johnny is our senior product manager here at Xyte and is one of our heads of innovation. Johnny's going to pop on in 1 second. But before I hand it over to Johnny, there he is. Before I hand it over to Johnny, what I want to do quickly is kind of set the stage on what we just heard from Jeff and Michael and how we're going to show you what you can do to really start to reframe that conversation as we've been talking about. A way to kind of have a platform to fix those problems that the largest enterprises in the space, the largest consultants in the world are looking for in partners with integration firms. And that brings me back to Xyte. So at Xyte, if you haven't worked with us yet, to give you a high-level overview, what Johnny's going to focus on in a second, is we're much more than just another tool in your tech stack. We're looking to be a true game changer in your managed service business. Xyte is a secure and scalable interface. If you haven't seen it yet, it's a way to monitor thousands and thousands of AV/IT devices and spaces from all of your different vendors as a value-added integrator. And it's all done from a single pane of glass. Biggest thing, and you're going to see that in a second, is that now, and what you're going to see at Infocom, is we're bringing agentic AI to that exact same single pane of glass, and now bringing agentic AI to all of your managed service contracts. So all of you that are on this call and watching this recording, I know you're probably managing dozens, hundreds, thousands of customer sites and devices, hundreds and thousands of warranties and files and service level agreements and integrations to all different systems that Jeff and Michael were talking about. It becomes chaotic. So instead of having to jump between these different platforms and logging into different systems, it simply becomes unscalable and not sustainable. That's the mess. And now we're going to talk about how Xyte becomes this fix. Think of Xyte now as kind of like your mission control, your AV CRM, for lack of a better term, a way to kind of monitor, run, and launch your entire service business from that single clean interface. You can manage your customers, you can manage devices, you can manage rooms and connections, and keep them all neatly tied to a federated customer's tenant. And with our newest feature, which Johnny's going to show you in a second, with the edge device, you can now manage everything, even on a local network. I'm talking things beyond just AV. If you remember what Jeff was talking about, where we need to be cross-functional, we need to go beyond the room because we're bringing more things like BMS-type systems, printers, IT-level laptops for BYOD devices and phones now become monitorable and manageable and part of that single pane of glass. So really, in summary, why deploy Xyte and kind of what you're going to see today, 4 main key points that I want you guys to think about as Johnny's walking through the how to get started. 1 is to reduce the response times and be proactive. 2 is to streamline all of your equipment management with a centralized cloud-based control. The 3rd one is to extend those device lifespans and minimize downtime, as kind of Jeff and Michael were talking about, those key metrics. And 4, build new service offerings and really refocus the conversation now on that value and outcomes, as Michael and Jeff were talking about, and now offer it on a managed service platform versus just a simple managed service contract. So finally, you can deliver this better, faster customer support and AI enable your integration business overnight. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. What I want to do now is stop talking, but also bring Johnny on here to really show you everything that I've been talking about as an answer to what Jeff and Michael were just talking about on this panel. So Johnny, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here and talk about things that are very dear to my heart. A bit about myself. I've been doing product management, SaaS companies, B2B mostly for the past decade or so. I've been doing kind of all bits and bytes of product management. So designing user interfaces, data modeling, machine learning, data science, analytics. Xyte really kind of brings it all together for me. So it's great to be interacting with so much technology. My previous company was Big Panda, big player in the IT operations space. A lot of the conversation that just happened was a big kind of aha moment for me, trying to see how AV can catch up with IT in terms of remote monitoring and looking at the big picture and trying to find root causes for things that are becoming more and more complex. What I'm going to walk you through today is a quick view of what Xyte can do in terms of monitoring your devices, bringing them in all into a single pane of glass, and how quickly you can do it to manage your customers and their devices. So let me screen share. All right. Thanks, Andrew. Awesome. So for those of you who have never seen Xyte before, this is my customers portal. This is where I manage my customers. We're going to pretend I'm AV Services Inc., a managed services provider and integrator. And you can see over here, I have my customers separated out into different parts of what we're calling the organization's tree. So let's say I manage devices for Salesforce, for GE, for Penn State, etc. I can keep each of those in separate hierarchies. The devices are separate. I cannot move devices from one to the other. So in terms of keeping your data secure, that's that. If I want to invite someone from GE to see GE devices or someone from Salesforce to see Salesforce devices, they only see their own tenant. These are completely separate from each other. Now, kind of to zoom in on what a device looks like. So you probably manage your devices on many kinds of clouds, be it Zoom, Teams, PolyLens, NeatPulse, all sorts of clouds. Xyte can not only bring those in, but also provides a uniform experience for each device. So if your technicians are used to working, swivel their heads between 12 different cloud portals, not only do you no longer have to switch between them, you don't have to learn them. There's no learning curve once you've gotten through that initial hump of seeing what a device looks like at Xyte. So let's look at this AvaCore display in our Newark site. You can see that I get that basic information for online, offline, but also richer information. For example, what inputs are available, which source is the active source, how strong is the backlight, and again, varying by model, extra information to see what is the status of the device. This information is based on telemetry coming from the device. So this is what it looks like behind the scenes. Not very pretty, but very, very useful. So that's why we organize it into a neat dashboard. And all this information is then used to truly understand what's actually going on with the device. Now, if a device is faulty, I can not only take a look at what's going on, I can actually send commands. So I can reboot a device, I can upgrade firmware if I need to, I can change inputs if someone says, hey, I've plugged in the HDMI, but I don't see anything. I can just do that remotely. So I think it was Jeff who said before that some issues will require boots on the ground, but some issues can be resolved remotely. These are those cases where instead of sending someone or talking to someone over the phone, I can even do this proactively. I can see that an incident has opened because someone's defined a rule that if there is no active input, someone should be notified, and I can get an incident on that on my device. So, having seen what a device looks like, how do we organize these devices? The devices are organized into customers, as mentioned, but customers have complex hierarchies. You may have multiple offices for a customer. There may be multiple floors, multiple rooms, all need to be managed in a way that is coherent and easy to track. So the same way that, for example, Zoom device management has a location hierarchy, you can also model the same location hierarchy in Xyte. So for Salesforce, we have the SF office, underneath which we have Salesforce Tower with the different meeting rooms, and you can expand this to be thousands of rooms deep, and the hierarchy is not limited to 3. You can go down to 4, 5, 6, and more if you need to. This view of devices is one way to look at things, but sometimes you want to see a bit more of a higher level view. So you have an option to view a dashboard showing you kind of a summary of the information for that space or that customer. Again, this is more of an operational focus, so it'll give you metrics about things that are pertinent to managing those devices on a day-to-day basis. Active incidents for that space. So let's say we're looking at Salesforce Tower as a specific space. We're filtered down only to those devices in that space. Additional information which could be useful about that space. So maybe devices are distributed. If I'm looking at Salesforce, I'll see devices across the different sites. I can see files related to this specific deployment. It could be wiring schematics, it could be user guides, it could be warranties or contracts. And there may be notes related to people to get in touch with or links to other resources available in my organization. Finally, another point of conversation that came up in the previous panel was, say there's a room with a camera down. I can go and get a replacement camera, replace it for that meeting that's coming up and is really important, and then troubleshoot that offline. I can also manage those replacement parts, those assets, those devices which are either not connected at the moment or not connectable at all, for example, wireless mice. I can manage those as assets as well. And if there are any time-based trackers I need to keep, for example, warranty or refurbishment that needs to happen, I can keep all that information in the same interface. So again, focused on that customer.
Yeah, Johnny, I think that's a nice, cool key feature that was added to this recently, because even as Michael and Jeff were talking about in the panel about BYOD, sometimes BYOD devices don't have a network connection. It's not going to give me online, offline. But hey, you know what? If somebody calls me and says my room is broken, I better know that there's a offline device or a non-networked device in that room when I try to troubleshoot. And this is a great spot for that.
Absolutely. So even before going to actually troubleshoot that issue, I can look at Xyte, understand what I have in that room, make decisions based on that. All right, so this was kind of an overview of how things are organized in Xyte. Let's pretend that we are now adding a new customer. Okay, so these are the customers I have today. I'm starting a new project with Boeing, and I want to add Boeing as a customer. So it's easy as adding Boeing, adding a logo, and I now have an additional Boeing customer. Now, Boeing has been managing AV equipment much before onboarding AV Services, Inc. as a contractor. They already have all their devices on Zoom. They want to have those devices managed or at least monitored by AV Services, Inc. But I really don't want to spend all that time adding 2,500 Zoom devices to my Boeing customer. So fortunately, I don't have to. What I can do is just add a direct integration, connect the Zoom for Boeing to my Xyte tenant, authorized by Boeing. So many integrators have had this problem where their customers would like them to manage those devices, but usually what that means is that they need access to Boeing's Zoom admin, not something that a lot of customers would be really happy to do. So through Xyte, I'm going to connect our internal Xyte tenant as an example. I have an option to connect Zoom rooms. And I'm going to connect it to Boeing. So I'm adding what we're calling a cloud-to-cloud connector, and we have many of these. And I'm not authorized to connect to Boeing Zoom, as mentioned before. I'm going to ask my contact at Boeing, the AV manager, to authorize me to import the devices into Xyte. He doesn't have to give me added permissions. He doesn't have to give me the credentials himself. He just has to authorize it for me. So I hit authorize. I have an authentication link, which I can send to him, one over email, one over text, if I want to be extra secure. Authorization link and passcode. He doesn't need to sign up. He doesn't have to have a user. This is a one-off. All right, there's usually a login screen, but we've been doing this all day in and out. So all he had to do was enter his Zoom credentials. Those do not get shared with me as the service provider. And you're going to see that in just a moment. I now have an active Zoom Rooms integration with Boeing, and I'm going to start see devices coming in. This may take a minute, but you can see down here that it's already started to import the hierarchy. So under Zoom, we don't have much of a hierarchy at Xyte, but if Boeing has one spanning, again, no matter how many rooms, it's all going to be pulled in. So you have the exact same space organization as Boeing with all the devices underneath. It just takes a couple minutes to start pulling them in.
So Johnny, just so I get this right, literally by just clicking a couple buttons, I can even actually send the information through the Xyte platform. I can bring in all that CDM information along with potentially all the other cloud-to-cloud connectors that we have at Xyte, like Teams Rooms and BiAmp Workplace and QSC Reflect. These things are just auto-importing all the devices and the hierarchies?
Exactly. So you can see that I didn't create this space called Floor 1. That just came in, or Denny's. These just came in together with Zoom. And so did these three devices. Again, this is our Xyte demo lab, so there's not a whole lot of devices. But if there were 1,000 devices here, it would just be pulling them in together with the hierarchy continuously over, say, maybe half an hour. And then you have all those devices managed through Xyte. You cannot provision, you cannot delete, so you can't really break the devices. You still don't have the same permissions as an admin on ZDM, but you can definitely remotely monitor and manage those devices. So again, sending the reboot commands, you can see that the experience is very, very similar to what you saw before. You don't have to learn ZDM. It's the same interface with the same information and the same commands, or commands dependent on the specific model and vendor, but it's a similar experience in terms of what the end user sees at the integrator troubleshooting a problem. Great, so we've talked about importing devices. We've talked about what the devices look like, but there are not all devices, as you know, are cloud enabled. We have devices that are only monitored on the local network. That's often a problem. Domo's is one solution to that, but Domo's information isn't very rich. There's not a whole lot you can do in terms of communicating with the device. And that's exactly why we've recently launched and are hard at work on expanding Xyte Connect Plus Edge, which is basically our on-prem solution to communicate with those devices that you would like to also monitor through Xyte. Single pane of glass, have those all in one place where you can manage them. So well, I'm not going to walk you through the installation process of the edge itself on a local computer. It's also 5 minutes. But for simplicity's sake, we're going to take a separate customer that we've created in advance with that edge. So Coca-Cola in this case. Let's add a space just so you see what that looks like. Let's say we have the Atlanta HQ. And underneath we have floor for lobby. Okay. Under this agent section, we have an Xyte edge connected to Coca-Cola. So this is a local computer, a NUC or what have you, sitting in Coca-Cola's internal network that communicates with Xyte. Adding a new agent, if you wanted to, was as easy as installing that edge on a local computer, passing over a parameter, and submitting. That's it. Now I want to claim a TV sitting on that 4th floor. So I go back to Coca-Cola. This is the space I want to add it to. And I'm going to add a new connected device. And here you can see all the different brands which we are adding support for and rolling out. And the one we're focusing on right now is Sony. And we're going to connect to Bravia TV. And we're going to call it floor for lobby display. I have 2 parameters I need to pull from the device itself. It's IP and an authentication code specific to Bravia TVs. I'm going to copy those over. And I'm going to claim. At this point, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, this is remarkable because, Johnny, just at ISC, when we were talking with integrators, it was groundbreaking to have all these cloud-to-cloud connections. It was groundbreaking to be working with these native manufacturers to have their devices auto-enabled into Xyte. But it was that final mile of like, well, that device doesn't have a cloud, or the device, isn't working natively with Xyte just yet, but I need to complete the picture. And so what I'm seeing here is really this gateway to answer that question is now it truly is 100% of your devices that are on a network can be monitored and managed through, I think this is key, an enterprise grade edge device. And it's something that can be whitelisted and secured by you, the customer, you, the integrator. You supply the hardware. We don't supply any hardware. We simply give you this software package to complete that picture. It's really the industry's first 100% field of view of everything in there, right?
Absolutely. You've got all that coming in to a single pane of glass. You can see, again, the experience is very consistent. This is what we've seen before. So again, same side panel, same dashboard. You've got rich information. It's not just online, offline. Is it on in terms of power? What's the active input? Where's the sound coming out from? I can control the volume. I can send a command to change the volume.
That's huge. So it's not just monitoring. We do have the ability through Edge to not, when we cloudify these devices, because I like that word through this gateway, right? We're cloudifying them into Xyte. We now actually able to manage them, push devices, control things, right?
Absolutely. So imagine that you see that the someone calls and said, I can't manage the volume. It's, someone who's less technical, someone who really needs help with having the room up and running because he's scrambling for a meeting and he just noticed that things aren't working. You could maybe do half or maybe even all of the things he needs, setting the input, setting the volume, setting the brightness, all from, remotely. You don't have to even go down 3 floors. You don't have to send someone because it's a really important client. Just do everything remotely. Reboot, right? Problem, let's try rebooting, see what happens. If not, boots on the ground in much quickly, much faster. So again, whether you bring information through cloud-to-cloud connectors, Edge, we also have native connections. Some manufacturers have chosen to build their cloud on Xyte, so we have native devices. Just to name a few, Bluesound, Avacor, Symmetrix, Planar, Wirestorm. And if you look at those devices, we've looked at one before when we were at the... So these Avacor displays, again, very similar experience. We're trying to abstract away the technology. It doesn't really matter how the device is connected to the person who needs to troubleshoot it or the person that needs to use it. So wherever not necessary, we don't make that explicit. it becomes a bit explicit behind the scenes when you need to troubleshoot something. If you have a device that's down, you want to understand, is it this device or is my connector down? Is there a problem with the edge? Is there a problem with the cloud-to-cloud integration? That's where we make that explicit. But otherwise, the experience should be as uniform and as seamless as possible.
This is amazing. I mean, the speed of innovation, I think, is incredible just to see see this happening live, to go from cloud to cloud to native to now this edge device to complete that picture. And I think, Johnny, really what that I want to lead into now, because I'm already seeing some questions come in from the audience, and we talked about it in the last panel, is now that we've set the foundation, right? It's like, okay, I have visibility and potentially control over everything. That gets me almost all the way there, right?
Right.
But what is coming next? And I got one that said you mentioned I can AI enable my integration firm, or I can AI enable my dealership. How am I taking this data and now adding even that extra layer of value to my customer? How am I differentiating myself?
Absolutely. Just a sec. So there's a brief intro to that part, right? Next part is you can manage the devices. Everything I've shown you now, you're still being reactive. Someone says, hey, I have a problem. You go into the device remotely, you can troubleshoot, you can reset, but you're still not being proactive. So that's the next step in the value chain. You don't just come in and wait for a problem to crop up. You actually proactively get notified that there is a problem. So we don't have any of these set up, but there's an area for incidents. It doesn't have to be for this one device. You can look at incidents across the board. For all your devices, all your customers, you can filter this if you want to focus on one customer or another. But this is where your incidents come in and you decide, do I handle them? Are they really issues or not? Now, assuming you don't want to be sitting in front of the screen all day looking at Xyte and waiting for something to happen, you can very easily just connect Xyte incidents into whatever platform you use today for alerting. It could be email, it could be Slack, it could be your ticketing system, ServiceNow, HubSpot, what have you. Once those are connected, you can set any customer, any space. You don't have to be at the customer level. You can go even more granular than that. But let's say I want to remotely monitor Salesforce and I want to route that to a specific team or specific person. I can manage incident routing for Salesforce. And all I need to do is add my email. If I have an integration, then I have to set up that integration and add it. But as you can see, there are several. And now I'm going to be notified every time an incident happens, and I can be proactive about it. So if an incident happened at 6 in the morning and there's a meeting at 9 in the morning, when I come into the office at 7:30, I can look at that list of incidents and understand, what do I need to handle? What do I need to do before those meetings start? Now, next level, which is coming closer to answering your question, is great. So I have my operations teams and my technicians running around and managing these things. They're able to be more proactive and more easily looking at this single pane of glass because it's all in a single place. But what do I show my customer at the end of the month? How do I justify the cost of my services? How do I show them the value that they're getting? This really ties into the conversation previously with Jeff and Michael, and something I'm personally really excited about because data is what gets me up in the morning. We have started rolling out a V1 of analytics. Analytics is the basis for reporting. So showing that information, what really resonated with me on that previous panel was, what information do customers want to see? What information do MSPs want to see? What is that information? That's why this is a V1 and not the product, but rather the start of a conversation with our customers. We want to be able to show you, for your specific device estate and your customers, what's actually going on at an aggregate level. Okay, so last 30 days, I'm looking at all of my customers, all the devices I manage. How many incidents have opened? How has that trended over the previous 30 days? What is my mean time to resolve incidents? 22 hours, 26 minutes, that's not very good. Is that being skewed by a specific model? Is that being skewed by a specific customer? What's causing this? Is this a cause for worry? I want to see this going down. I see that it's gone. This is, a number like this probably indicates that it's gone down from kind of baseline, just setting up and making everything work, to something that's closer to reasonable, but still not a good enough response time. This makes it something I can work on and I can improve this month over month. Those device vendors, how many do I manage? How varied is my device estate, my model estate? Am I working with too many vendors? Am I working with too many models? Which one of those models is giving me grief? I think Michael raised this question. Here you can see it. Out of my 6 MacBook Pros, I've had, again, small numbers, so it's not very significant, but if you're managing thousands, this makes a big difference. 1 out of every 6 devices has an incident. Again, 6 devices isn't much, but if you had 600 devices, that's 100 devices people are handling over the past month. DSPs or anything else where I have 100% of devices, if this is a significant number, then I need to have a conversation either with my team who configured it, either with the customer who has a problem on their network, or maybe even with the manufacturer themselves. What's going on per space, right? Which spaces have been giving me the most trouble over the past month? Are they all within a single customer? Maybe they had a network issue. Are they across multiple customers? Maybe there's specific equipment in there that I should be checking. And then this space, which we've left blank because we didn't have enough time to bring out that widget for V1, is the uptime downtime that we've been talking about, right? What is my uptime downtime? What's impacting that? What affects that? I can filter by show me my different customers, show me specific devices, show me specific models, or maybe take out the outliers. I mean, you can see here that XT1143 from BrightSign is a lot of my device estate. Maybe that's skewing my numbers. I can just filter it out, exclude XT, voila. And now I'm looking at everything else. What do numbers look like now? What does my MTTR look like now? Not very significant, so that wasn't it. But this is the start of that conversation of what are integrators, service providers looking to see, and what are their customers looking to see. So I think
Yeah, Johnny, this real quick on this,
Yeah.
because Jeff and Michael brought it up when they set the stage for us, which was about changing the conversation and leveling up how you're speaking about the rooms, right? And not simply talking about the newest black box that has come out or the greatest sound bar in the world, but rather what value are you bringing that impacts productivity in those spaces, because these meeting rooms are now mission critical. And honestly, before you weren't able to have this conversation.
Right.
It wasn't possible. I could sit down and show you the uptime, downtime of my control system or of my touch screen, but never before of my room, because I had all that data in one place. And now finally, as an integrator, you can sit there and have those value-driven conversations, both on day one, but also now on day 365. To say, this is what I've done. This is why you should renew your managed service contract. This is why you should not go out and shop for a new integrator, because look, I've delivered on everything that I've promised you, and I've given you data, as Jeff and Michael were talking about, to go to your boss to show how you need more budget or why you need more allocations or more resources to manage your estate. This has never been able to be done before, and it's amazing to see that we're finally able to do this, and it's only simply a result of the ability to bring everything, every device, no matter the communication method, into that one screen. Native, cloud to cloud, and now finally with Edge, doesn't matter. It's all coming to Xyte. I can finally report and review the data.
Exactly. And because, again, this is just a V1, and we're looking to continue this conversation with our customers and their customers to understand what is that data that everyone wants to, bring in and talk about. I think this is the opportunity to launch a poll that we have ready for the webinar to get your input on what's top of mind for you. What kind of data would you like to see in reporting that would help you show value to your customers? So you should see the poll come up on your Zoom panel. What we're asking you to do is take a look at the items that we've listed and rank them in order of importance for you. If what you're most interested in is not on this list, there's a 7th option for other. Please select that as a high priority so that we get an understanding of what are people looking to add. This goes directly into product feedback for the V2, V3, V4 of the analytics piece.
Yeah, and as we're giving some people some time to rank these, what this gets me to as well, Johnny, is just the importance of your feedback. I know I mentioned it, but it's just so important to stress, is even just from ISE to Infocom. I mean, it's 4 short months. The amount of adjustments and innovations and development that we've made in the platform solely because of your feedback is remarkable. I mean, Johnny, what you and your team do is truly magic. I called you a magician before, but it's true. And I want to make sure the audience knows is these aren't just simply polls to change up the conversation in this webinar. No, this is literal feedback that you have to impact product decision making at Xyte. And ideally, your impact is going to affect your own business, because we're going to deliver these new features. We're going to deliver these types of reports and analytics to you so that you can ensure that you take action on them and having and changing that new conversation with the Jeffs from Deloitte's of the world and the Michaels from the CDAs of the world. And it's going to really start to position your dealership and your integration firm completely differently. So I think it's going to be up for just a minute or less. So please get in those last couple answers. And then Johnny, while everyone's finishing up this poll, I think it's absolutely time to finally just hammer home the what about AI question that we keep getting.
Well, if you insist. It's an area that I find really, really interesting. There's a lot, everyone talks about AI, everyone talks about large language models. We're also, always hard at work at thinking, well, what does it bring to our customers? We don't want to just throw an AI agent into Xyte. We want it to do something that would actually save our customers time, money, pain, something tangible, something beneficial. So again, this is a early stage project. We're still piloting it. There are so many more directions in which we can take it, but we're focusing on something that LLMs are really good at, which is summarizing a lot of information at once. So as you start to manage these devices remotely, you may encounter new incidents. You may bring on new team members. You may struggle with things that you haven't struggled before, and that the information on how to troubleshoot that information, those incidents, is often siloed within experienced team members, advanced engineers, things that for a level 1 technician may not be obvious or trivial. They may be things that people know that is not hard to do, but they don't remember exactly how. Then, it's all right, let me look it up and let me find how to do it. We want that to be at the tip of your fingers. So let's look at a device that's been giving us grief in the Tel Aviv office. We have in our Denny's meeting room, we have a control panel, Mercury, that's been going offline very frequently recently. And we think it's a network issue, but we like to troubleshoot it. So the technician on site, fairly new, has some experience with Crestron, but not a ton. They want to understand, well, what are my first steps? What should I be looking at? How do I approach this? They could get on a call with a more senior engineer. That person may not be available at the time. There may be reception issues. We want to make that information very accessible. So we have the AI assistant open up in Xyte, and let's ask him about this device. Let's say this device has been going offline frequently. I think it's a network issue. Help me troubleshoot.
And Johnny, this is just like natural language, right? Like we don't have any specific syntax that we have to throw in here. I can just talk to it like I do ChatGPT.
Exactly. Same experience. Exactly.
Amazing. And so what is it doing now in the background? I see it's like it's thinking, obviously, but like what is it actually looking for?
So first of all, you can see that it's aware of the context of the device. It knows that we're talking about a Crestron Mercury. Right? And what it's doing is it's summarizing all the information that you need to start troubleshooting. Right? So from here, it basically starts out with a checklist of what should I be checking. So check physical network connection, verify network config, check for known issues or limitations, try the web GUI, update firmware and drivers. These are, many steps you could say, yeah, obviously, clear cache, reboot device. Those are kind of the basic supports, ABCs. But if you need a detailed guide, if you need to drill down into one of these, help me find, where do I look at DNS and certificates? Where does that exist in Crestron Mercury? You could ask the Xyte assistant those questions to deep dive into how would I troubleshoot for this device? Where do I find the things that I need? You get responses.
This is unbelievable. I mean, this is game changing. And I know that this is only step one. I even see on here that the Xyte assistant is even offering like recommendations of what to take next. I think I saw, yeah. So like, suggestions. This is incredible. So, I mean, Johnny, where do you kind of see this going?
So the fact that it can summarize so much information at once, again, the biggest kind of value proposition for GPT or for LLMs in general is we want to bring more information into troubleshooting this device. What we're going to see is previously closed incidents on similar devices, logs, any information that's already been done in this customer. So, AV Services Inc., are things that we'll be able to leverage in the LLM, in the model. And whenever we try to troubleshoot, it will no longer just be this device, it will be all the history that I have for any other device of this model. So just a few examples of what we might see in the future.
I think this is amazing. I know we've gotten tons of questions about it, and it's going to be certainly the hit of the show, come InfoComm. Johnny, is there anything else that you'd like to leave the audience with before we close out here?
I think we've covered so much, and I'm personally excited to see where we will go with this. But really, again, to iterate, your feedback is really critical to help us drive innovation. So please share information, post webinar. We will have a survey. Please, please, please help us learn what helps you, and we're happy to develop it.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Johnny. All right, let me take back over here and bring us home before I bring you back for the Q&A at the end of the section. But honestly, what you just showed, I think, is remarkable. An overview of Xyte, obviously how to configure your customers in literally a matter of minutes. The ability now finally to incorporate the Xyte Edge, which is going to allow you to bring in every single device on your network, really complete that picture, gather the data, run analytics, run reports now that you have everything in one place, integrate into systems like Slack and email, and now I think just remarkably an AI assistant, truly something that everyone's been asking for, to finally be able to have natural language chat with what's going on in my space. Because more data just sometimes means more confusion, but now we have a way to cut through all of that. So before we wrap up, I did want to talk about a couple things that are in the labs, either just released or are about to be released. And one of the first ones is our universal API. And we've kind of hinted about this, everything from my opener to the panel to then Johnny. But what we've recognized is all of this data and all this increase in devices and technology has been providing us really with a lot of FUD. We haven't been able to cut through it all. And yes, the Xyte Assistant is one great way to do so, to summarize all my manuals and give me recommendations on what to do next. But really the next step in that is this Xyte Universal API. This is going to take now everything we do and seamlessly integrate it into your everyday business operations. It's something that has truly been asked about for years and years and years. I love what you guys do. I want to bring data into one place, but give me one handshake outward, because the last thing Xyte's going to do is replace your ServiceNow, replace your ERP, replace your CRM, replace your room booking system. Rather, we want to be an aggregate of all of the data for you to have an easier way to integrate, remain open on a standard, and provide rich data to everything else you use. And one last thing on this, which I think is going to be a great next step, is for a lot of the integrators on the call, you may have your own monitoring and management solution that you built. But instead of simply continuing to invest in all of the new devices and connections and AI agents that need to be developed to stay up to speed on all of this, you now can leverage Xyte's device API, the universal handshake, to bring all that information into your system as well. And of course, on that topic, AI. This is a constantly evolving solution. We have launched the Xyte Assistant. You're going to see it at InfoComm. You saw it on the demo today in real time. But obviously in AI, it is constantly evolving. We have to keep training it. And that's the big thing. And so in addition to constantly bringing out new features in AI, and things from self-healing to capturing base states and reverting to those base states for rooms, we are also going to be launching MCP server integration, which at its core is going to allow you to take everything we do, like that device API, but have a single connection into all of your other AI agents. So if you're using ServiceNow AI agent, Salesforce AI agent, you now can even query Xyte through a single AI communication method to get that information. It's really the AV industry's first kind of chat GPT for my conference rooms, and amazing things to come around that as well. So lastly, guys, to wrap us up, I do want to make sure you guys all have a chance to connect with us after this webinar before we wrap with the Q&A. Please use this QR code and really schedule a meeting with us so we can talk about how to get rid of that kind of clutter of different AI tools, different monitoring tools, different data and analytic tools, and really bring them into one nice, clean user interface. So you can scan this QR code to schedule a meeting with us today. Obviously, We've also got in the chat, you'll see a meeting link as well that you can click there if you're on your laptop. And most importantly, too, is at InfoComm. You guys can come and see us. We will be at booth 3153. You can see all of these Connect Plus Edge and integrations all live in one place. And to leave you with this as well, is we're going to be launching 3 incredible ways to do business with us. 3 things you guys can take action on from now until the end of June, from doubling your device licenses to locking in some extreme pricing, or really pricing discounts from now until the end of the fiscal year as well. And of course, getting early access to all the new features that we showed you today. So with that, and with the 5 minutes we have left, I'd love to bring everybody back on stage. So let's get Jeff and Michael and Johnny back on here. And let's talk a little bit about some of the Q&A that we have that, of course, everyone on the webinar right now and those that are going to be watching the recording want to get some answers for. In addition to that, I'm going to keep this slide up here just for a second further, in case you guys want to reach out to myself, Johnny, Jeff, or Michael. You guys can capture our emails here as well. So going through a couple of these questions for the next 5 minutes, Johnny, actually, first question for you was about this Edge. The question was, if I buy a separate computer to load this Edge on, is there a specific computer that you recommend? Is there anything specific about the device that I need to be aware of to ensure Edge runs properly on my site to cloudify my devices? Johnny, you there? You're muted and video's off. You can hear us. All right. Well, if Johnny's not there, I can answer it as well. The answer actually is, guys, that there is no real big requirements for running the Edge. As long as it's a device capable of running Docker, that's the only thing you need to be able to bring in all those other networkable devices. And also, if you go to docs.xyte.io, you're going to see a much more technical deep dive of everything that's required to get all 3 of those connection methods, cloud to cloud native and Edge, back into one place for you at Xyte. Looks like we have a question here for you, Michael. You mentioned standards and you mentioned open integrations. The question was around how best do you recommend an integrator to take action on those standards and work with you as a consultant to bring value to end users together? It's a great question.
Well, so first thing I would say is that forever and ever in the AV world, there's been this hard divide between integrators and consultants and customers, and everybody's in their own silo and no one should talk together, right? I have a slightly different view of it. I'm a firm believer in collaboration. And whenever we engage with clients, we're always very open to collaboration, especially with the integrator. And if they have someone that they like to work with, it's open collaboration. At the end of the day, we want, if I'm working for Jeff, I want Jeff happy, right? At the end of the project, Jeff's not going to look at me and go, oh, well, you're great and the integrator's bad, or the integrator's great and you're bad. We're all in the same boat. So I would say, if someone's looking to figure out how to work with us specifically, reach out to me on email, because we'll have a conversation about it. We can either work together on something, we can help you with something, or we can go work together with someone like Jeff, right? If you're asking more about what's a good way to go and develop a relationship with a consultant to bring value, I think several of them are very open to that. And I think it comes down to the approach, which is, hey, I'd like to get together with you, not to tell you what we can build, but to talk about how we can work together and how we can each add value to the end client, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. And when integrators reach out to us and say, hey, I want to come in and talk with you, like I don't care what lines you carry or whatever. Like I care more about what are the skill sets, what drives you, and how do we work together to bring success. And I think if you approach it from that standpoint, you'll wind up with a positive result.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Looks like we have time for 2 more questions. One is back over here at Xyte from Johnny's demo. The question was, for the Edge and bringing in those non-cloud to cloud devices, how are updates handled? So a quick answer to that is the updates are, 1, it's self-updating from the cloud, which is awesome. And 2, you have no need to actually take any action or do anything on-prem. It's all going to be pushed down to the device itself. So if there's ever a firmware update or even a BIOS update that adjusts communication methods, all those updates will be managed by Xyte down to the edge, and the experience to your customer is going to be all the same. And the key there is that your cloud-to-cloud connectivities, your edge connectivities, your native integrations, it's always going to be reporting to that one screen, that one database. The last question, really all we have time for is actually back to you, Jeff. And it's a great question from Integrator is, what do you, at someone like at Deloitte, look for in a managed service contract?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I think depending on the space and the caliber of project, right, that can have a multitude of answers. But for managed service contract, really it's around one, monitoring, reporting. How are we ensuring that that's tying into our future product growth as well as our current technology stack? Number two, what is the support and resources SLA to ensure we have uptime for spaces? I think that is one of the key and priority things. We have to have a direct line. We have to have the bat phone, for lack of better terms, to be able to reach Integrator, to reach the person or people who can solve a problem if it is past what our on-site capabilities are. I think that is key. And that's really when it leans into some of our bigger experiential spaces. The reason why that highlights is, there are sessions being hosted there that are revenue generating, and client in space, if you're impacting their ability and putting the facilitation team or that delivery team on their heels due to a technology issue, well, now you're impacting revenue. It becomes a much bigger problem in your organization. So SLAs are one of those important key points, but it's also how do you ensure that the multiple layers of individuals that goes through from a support standpoint, that you've pinpointed the issue quickly, so that when you do have folks on the ground, they understand your room and your space and go directly to the problem versus trying to untangle the knot or understanding what your space is. We've seen some of that happen in the past. And I think the best approach is creating run books or items that you can give to your different regional support teams so that as they come into your facility or into your environment, they're ready to go. And there's no question as to what the space is. We've seen many times folks walking in and they think they're walking into a meeting room, and it's anything but a meeting room. It is a fully integrated space that has all the bells and whistles, and it can do a little of a spin out if you don't have the proper information in front of those techs and those individuals going into those scenarios. That's one of them. We host a varied of levels of support and service contracts, so we really only look to utilizing those in some of our bigger client-facing spaces to date. And it's really around, if you do the data and reporting correctly, then you can self-service a lot of that troubleshooting and support from some of the smaller rooms and integrations.
That's awesome. Nailed it, Jeff. I appreciate it. And with that, I think that's our way to close it out. Jeff, Michael, thank you guys so much. I know we threw your emails on there. Is that the best way to contact you? Anything else you'd recommend to reach out to you? Jeff, I'll start with you.
Yeah, LinkedIn's fine as well, or my Deloitte email, either one.
Amazing. And Michael?
Yeah, very same way. LinkedIn, my work email. Super friendly and happy to respond. So, this was great. Thank you very much. Everybody's happy to participate.
Incredible. Yeah, Jeff, Michael, thank you guys so much for kind of setting that stage for us. Johnny, thank you so much for the demonstration and really showing one option, right? Not obviously the only option, but one incredible option to take action as an integrator, kind of level up that conversation and really talk about business value add to the client base that Jeff and Michael were giving us. And most importantly, thank you to all of you, the audience here, for joining us live, and for anyone watching this recording. Could not thank you guys enough. As a reminder, there is a survey. Once this webinar closes out, you will be prompted to answer a survey. Please do answer that survey. Again, your feedback is super important to what we do and make here. It's very helpful to what we innovate on. But with that, again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Johnny. Thank you to the audience, and really looking forward to hopefully seeing all of you guys at InfoComm in Orlando in just over a week. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Take care.
Yeah, thanks, team.